FundMore started out of the frustration really for around trying to fund loans quickly and not being able to find the technology stacks out in market to actually solve that problem. And after spending months and a couple of years trying to build out a mortgage lender with technology stacks from around the globe that were just outdated and really old and didn't allow for any modernization, it really forced us to pivot into what FundMore is today, which is a product company with a services engine, with a back office process engine, and an innovation lab. After months of scouring the globe to try to find a really innovative solution to solve the back office plumbing, if you will, for financial institutions to solve their lending processes or their lending problems, and I guess at that point our own, it was almost our duty, I think, at that point to try to solve it ourselves, because we had a very clear vision about what we wanted to accomplish. We wanted to make home ownership more accessible to Canadians. That meant we had to solve mortgage lending. There wasn't any technology stacks out there, and so we started building it. FundMore operates in sort of an ecosystem around financial institutions today, and whether that be in mortgage lending, whether that be in insurance. And in order to solve those challenges, we really had to build out these sort of four pillars of our business today, which number one is started with an IT services arm, which allowed us to support our financial institutions, building what they would like to see as sort of their or operate as their sort of magic sauce, and build out the technology around that. Then number two was building out the BPO service. So this is an operation that supports HR, finance, IT, and human augmentation to their workforce to be able to provide the human capital to actually execute things more cost effectively. And that's actually now spurred into not just working with financial institutions, but also into the startup ecosystem. And then, three was, our obviously our core product company. And this is what got us, got the engine running, building out the solutions that are core to operations for financial institutions to adjudicate loans and be able to fund those loans. And then the last one, which I think is the most exciting one for me, is this idea of FundMore Labs, which is a ability to take the challenges we're seeing internally and externally with our partners, and then rapidly build an MVP product, which can then be dispersed across our different business lines, which gives us a big advantage, I think, because when you look at some of those incubators that exist out there, they're often different ideas coming in and wrapping sort of advisors and community around them to try to bring them out to market. But a lot of the infrastructure, a lot of the the support, and a lot of the go to market is all down to the founders. Because of what we're trying to solve and how we're thinking about this, we actually have the go to market solved. We have the financial institutions sitting there that we're already servicing. We have these different startups that we're already servicing. We have these large enterprises that we're building technology for already, that we're already servicing. And so being able to bring this concept of rapid ideation to MVP, and then proving it with the go-to-market solve, because we can bring it back through our trusted relationships, is a big advantage. And then we have our BPO company that can support that as well, which then provides an entire back office support, as I said before, from finance support to HR support to IT support. It really came back to we were a mortgage company first. And a mortgage brokerage first. We wanted to be able to solve the mortgage ecosystem by making it a faster, simpler solution for everyone. What really came out of that, though, is that there are big challenges along the route that needed to be solved. Some of that we could solve on our own. Some of it, it didn't make sense to bring into our product company to try to solve it amongst what is already a very large ERP type platform for lending. That some of these things are smaller quickly that small products or projects that can be quickly, rapidly built to actually solve a big problem, but didn't necessarily need to be part of this huge ecosystem platform that we've built out. Because I think we all have the same mission across all these companies. It's really about how do we drive the most efficiency for our lending partners and our other companies and platforms and clients that we work with for the least amount of cost and human capital. We're all driving towards this same ultimate mission, which is how do you simplify these workflows? How do you make it really simple for a borrower to get a mortgage? How do you make it simple for a financial institution to engage with FundMore? How do you make it simple for the investor on the back end that needs to buy these loans for all the reasons they need to buy the loans? How do we make that a simple process? How do we make it simple for that startup that has decided they want to solve a big problem in this space? And how do we figure out how we can engage with them so that their process, so they can focus on what they focus on best, which is typically the creation, innovation, and remove a lot of the headaches of building out a startup, which is often sort of the back office processes, the finance, the HR, all these sort of operational things that take time and effort away from those founders. I know that was one of the challenges I had back in 2020 when we started this whole thing. FundMore is really looking at solving, not just making things simpler, but really trying to automate redundant, human-heavy processes in the workflow, and being able to reduce headcount or make employees way more efficient at what they do and allow them to process 10 times what they do today in their specific jobs within that workflow is really how we're trying to solve that first. And sometimes that means there's a technology augmentation. Sometimes that means there's potentially cheaper human support. Sometimes that's just a service that we can offer to take that burden off of the financial institution. Most financial institutions operate in silos, and it's a very complex workflow that everyone has to be part of to actually execute that vision of funding their loan, which is sounds pretty simple. You decide you want to buy a home. Eventually it's got to come out the other end, and someone's going to write the check, and you're going to buy your home. But there are 6 or 7 core processes in that workflow, and often they're very siloed in nature. Partially because technology has forced it, because everyone has their own technology world they have to live in. Part of it is not finding a way to understand how much of that work is repetitive, how much of that work is done twice or 3 or 4 times across those different groups. And one of the things that we've been able to do is simplify a lot of that by bringing it into one system, keeping a chain of custody of the actions that actually occurred, reviewing the information once instead of 3 or 4 times. I mean, ultimately, lending boils down to 4 core buckets. It's data, documents, decisions, and then disbursements. And today, it's probably 8 buckets that they operate in. And so for us, being able to try to bring that down to 4 and then share the core information across the different departments allows for a much more efficient process. We earned the right when, I think when we funded probably the first $1 billion through the platform, I think it gave the industry the confidence in what we believed to be the future of mortgage lending. That has given, that the trust seal, if you will, that, these guys know what they're doing. They have the industry expertise. They have the technology expertise to actually deliver on what, their vision is, which is, ultimately, how do you fund a mortgage on the same day? But really what that means is, how do you make home ownership more accessible for Canadians? If you're not capable of funding that or processing that volume of loans and having that many users on a platform at any given time, in the hundreds that it's probably not worth the bet. There's risk to that. This is especially when you think about the complexity and the risk that lenders take to embed a solution like ours into their workflow. It does take a lot of there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of integrations, and ultimately, if something like this fails, they're not funding loans, and if they're not funding loans, they have clients, they have investors, they have regulators, all wondering what went wrong. So it's critical that you can prove this type of software at scale. And I think $25 billion proved that we're at scale. FundMore's future is in adjudication workflow. If you're in financial industry, or you're in wealth or health or insurance, and you have an adjudication workflow or an underwriting workflow, I believe we have the solution now to actually solve your problem and make it more capitally efficient, drive more margin, and make the process more streamlined and simpler for all involved. I realized my dream, which was, how would you make mortgage lending as simple as possible so somebody could walk in from an open house on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon, and by Monday morning have the keys delivered to them at their door, that they can move into that house the very next day, because the mortgage process was solved, that we were able to fund a mortgage in less than 24 hours. I think 10 years from now, I believe we're beyond mortgage lending. I think we've actually solved adjudication workflows for the globe. I think if you're an enterprise type company today and you fast forward yourselves 10 years from now, really it shouldn't be how am I going to do this anymore. It's what am I going to do next, because you've solved your workflow problem through a very simple yes no output.